My name is Emma Miller. This is my online dating experience. We all have an innate need for love and affection, which we can rarely provide for ourselves. When we cannot get them from those around us, online dating seems to offer moments of fulfillment. In as much as it carries its benefits, it also carries its risks. The vast, uncharted expanse of cyberspace often conceals more than it reveals. Most times, behind the curated profiles and seductive promises lie hidden motives, secrets, and deceptions that we may not see initially. Approach each connection with a discerning eye, trust your instincts, and safeguard your heart. Don't ignore the warning signs. They abound. When in a dilemma, don't hesitate to ask friends. Many have been through it. If you've been ensnared like me, don't be too hard on yourself. Forgive your missteps and move on with life, remaining hopeful. We learn better through mistakes. I tell you this. The right person, who will truly love you, is out somewhere waiting to be discovered. God made it so. The following is my story. I was the first of 3 children of my parents. I was the kind of woman who effortlessly drew attention. At 5'8", with a light complexion that seemed to radiate in any light, I carried myself with the quiet confidence of someone who had meticulously built a stable life. Working as the secretary to a bank director, I had spent years navigating the corporate world, steadily climbing the professional ladder. My hard work had paid off. I owned a cozy apartment, drove 2 reliable cars, and had a comfortable savings account to my name. Yet, at 32, despite my achievements, there was one area of my life that remained unfulfilled. Love. The endless cycle of blind dates, awkward small talk, and inevitable letdowns had left me weary and disillusioned. I had long since grown tired of the well-meaning advice from friends and relatives who assured me that the right one would come along when I least expected it. For me, that promise had started to feel more like a curse than a comfort. I tried everything: speed dating events, setups arranged by friends, and even the occasional office romance, but none led to anything meaningful. Each time I opened myself to the possibility of love, I ended up disappointed and retreated back into the safety of my work and routine. It wasn't that I was unhappy, I was proud of the life I had built. But there was a persistent ache in my chest, a longing for something more. That longing is what led me to online dating. Initially, it seemed like the perfect solution, a way to meet new people without the pressure of face-to-face interactions. I could browse profiles from the comfort of my home, getting to know potential matches before deciding whether to take the plunge. It was a way to keep my heart guarded while still holding out hope that love might be out there, somewhere, waiting for me. That was when I found Ryan. My heart fluttered the first time I saw Ryan's profile picture. There he was, the man I had envisioned in my prayers, tall, dark, and handsome, with an air of confidence that made my breath catch in my throat. Standing at 6'2", Ryan was exactly the kind of man I had always dreamed of, someone who would tower over me in that protective, comforting way I longed for. His muscular build hinted at strength, but it was his face that truly captivated me: dark hair cut low and clean, a strong jawline that exuded masculinity, and deep, soulful eyes that seemed to promise so much more than just surface-level attraction. I was immediately drawn in, unable to resist the pull of his seemingly effortless charm. I read his bio with growing excitement, my heart beating faster with each line. Ryan wasn't just a handsome face. His words were thoughtful, articulate, and resonated with me on a deep level. He spoke of his love for music and classic literature, things I cherished myself. He mentioned his passion for photography, a hobby I had always admired but never quite found the time to pursue. And then there was his desire to travel the world, a dream I had secretly nurtured for years but had never found the right partner to share it with. His profile said he was an architect and an estate developer. I felt he wouldn't be as busy as my bosses at the bank, which would give us time to care for each other and our future family. It felt almost too good to be true, but I couldn't help myself. I swiped right, a surge of hope rising in my chest. To my delight, it was an immediate match. The notification on my phone brought a smile to my face that I couldn't seem to shake. As I opened the chat, my fingers hovered over the keyboard, searching for the perfect opening line. But before I could type anything, a message popped up from Ryan. "Hi Emma. I've been waiting for someone like you." His words were simple, but they sent a thrill through me. From that moment on, our conversation flowed effortlessly. Ryan was everything I had hoped for and more. Charming, attentive, and quick to compliment my intelligence and beauty. He had a way of making me feel special, like I was the only woman in the world who mattered to him. We discussed everything, from our favorite books to our dreams for the future. It was as if we had known each other for years, our connection so natural that it almost felt like fate. Ryan's photos only deepened my infatuation. He sent me snapshots from his travels. Images of the bustling streets of Tokyo, where neon lights reflected off wet pavement, serene beaches, with golden sand stretching out as far as the eye could see, and quiet cobblestone alleys in European towns that looked like something out of a fairy tale. Each image was a glimpse into a life I had always wanted but had never dared to imagine I could share with someone. With every text message from Ryan, I felt myself growing more attached, more invested. He made me feel alive in a way I hadn't in years. Our conversations, once limited to text, quickly evolved into late-night phone calls. I would lie in bed, my heart racing as I listened to his voice. A deep, soothing tone that seemed to wrap around me like a warm blanket. Ryan had a way of making me feel like the most important person in the world, and I found myself eagerly anticipating the sound of my phone buzzing with a new message or call. Ryan was careful. He never pushed too hard or too fast, always respectful of my boundaries. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, asking about my day, my thoughts, and my dreams. He was attentive without being overbearing, considerate without being controlling. It was a balance that I found irresistible, and it only made me trust him more. As the weeks turned into months, our bond grew stronger. I began to daydream about the future, about the life we could build together, the love we could share, and the places we could explore. I dreamt of us hand in hand on Whitehaven Beach in Australia, and me sitting with my head on his broad shoulder at the Victoria Falls of Zambia and Zimbabwe. I had never felt this way about anyone before, and it scared me as much as it excited me. Later, beneath the surface of my happiness, a small, nagging doubt began to form. Ryan was too good to be real. It started as a faint whisper in the back of my mind, something I could easily ignore in the glow of Ryan's attention. But as time went on, that whisper grew louder. It wasn't just that we hadn't met in person yet. After all, Ryan always had a good reason for postponing our plans. There was always a work trip, a family emergency, or some other plausible excuse that made sense at the time. I wanted to believe him, and I did. But then there were the little things that started to creep out, the inconsistencies in his stories. The way he sometimes hesitated when I asked about his past, the times when he seemed distracted or distant. I tried to brush the thoughts aside, telling myself I was just being paranoid, looking for reasons to sabotage my own happiness and retreat to the familiar comfort of my former loneliness. But the doubts refused to be silenced. They gnawed at me, relentless and unforgiving. I found myself endlessly rereading our messages, searching for anything, no matter how small, that might confirm or dismiss my fears. It was during one of those late-night phone calls that the first crack in Ryan's facade appeared. We were talking about our future, about where we might travel together once we finally met in person. I mentioned a trip I had taken to Italy years ago, describing the way the light had looked as it filtered through the narrow streets of Venice, the sound of water lapping against the gondolas, the taste of fresh pasta at a little restaurant I had discovered by accident. Ryan was quiet for a moment, then he laughed softly. Venice, huh? Sounds amazing. I've always wanted to visit Italy, but I've never had the chance. My heart skipped a beat. You've never been to Italy? Nope. It's on my bucket list, though, Ryan said. My mind raced, trying to process what he had just said. I was certain, absolutely certain, that he had told me about a trip to Italy months ago when we had first started talking. He had sent me a photo of a sunset over the canals, with a caption about how he wished I had been there with him. I felt a cold knot of fear form in my stomach. I didn't want to believe it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. For the first time since we had connected, I didn't know what to say. Ryan seemed to sense my hesitation. Emma? Are you still there? He asked. Yeah, I replied, forcing myself to sound normal. I'm here. I just thought you mentioned something about Italy before. There was a pause, just long enough for me to notice. Then Ryan laughed again, a little too loudly. You must be mixing me up with someone else. I wish I'd been to Italy, though. Maybe we can go together someday. His words were smooth, his tone light, but I wasn't convinced. Doubt was creeping in, threatening to shatter the illusion I had built around him. I wanted to trust him, to believe that he was exactly who he said he was. But now, I wasn't sure. Yeah, I said quietly, not knowing what else to say. After that night, I became more cautious. I started to pay closer attention to what Ryan said, to the stories he told, to the details he provided. I wanted to catch him in another lie, to prove that my suspicions were justified. But Ryan was more subtle than the serpent. He knew exactly how to play his game, weaving a web of lies so intricate that I barely noticed the threads tightening around me. For weeks, everything seemed normal. Ryan was as charming and attentive as ever, and I found myself beginning to relax again, to let my guard down, telling myself that there must have been a mix-up somewhere. Then came the request. Ryan had mentioned his financial troubles before. But he had always downplayed them, making it seem like just a temporary setback. But one evening, as we were talking about our future, he brought it up again, this time with a seriousness that I hadn't heard from him before. Emma, I hate to ask this, but I'm in a bit of a bind. The project I'm working on is behind schedule, and I've run into some unexpected expenses. I wouldn't ask if it weren't absolutely necessary, but do you think you could help me out? Just a small loan, something to tide me over until things get back on track. I promise I'll pay you back as soon as I can. The alarm bells went off in my head. I had heard enough stories from friends and coworkers about online dating scams. About people who were conned out of their savings by someone they thought they could trust. I wanted to believe that Ryan was different, that he wasn't like those other men who preyed on vulnerable women. But the doubt that had been gnawing at me for weeks was now roaring in my ears, drowning out my hope. I don't know, Ryan, I said hesitantly. I mean, we haven't even met in person yet. This feels a little sudden. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and I could almost hear the gears turning in Ryan's mind as he tried to figure out how to respond. Finally, he sighed, a sound full of weariness and disappointment. Emma, I understand how this must look. I really do. And I don't blame you for being cautious. But I'm not asking you because I want to take advantage of you. I'm asking because I care about you, and I see a future with you. I wouldn't ask if I didn't feel like we had something real here. His words were persuasive, and I could feel my resolve starting to weaken. But there was still a part of me that couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that Ryan wasn't telling me the whole truth. I just need some time to think about it, Ryan, I said finally. Of course, Ryan replied, his tone understanding. Take all the time you need. I don't want you to feel pressured. I just want you to know that I'm here for you, and that I believe in us. We ended the call shortly after, but I didn't sleep much that night. I kept turning his words over in my mind, trying to make sense of my conflicting emotions. On the one hand, I wanted to trust Ryan, to believe that he was genuine and that his request was just a temporary hurdle we could overcome together. On the other hand, the warning signs were there. I didn't want to talk to my friends. They could say some negative things to dissuade me. I wanted Ryan to be real. 2 days later, I called for his account number and sent the money, telling myself it was a good risk to take. Before the date he said he would pay back, my phone buzzed. Ryan had sent my money back with something added for what he called chocolates. I couldn't contain my joy. Ryan was real. My dream about our future together increased. If he failed to call in the day, surely I would call in the evening. I wanted to tell him everything that happened, including people that asked me out. After some time, the doubts returned to my mind. The cracks in Ryan's stories had resurfaced and became harder to ignore. He grew more evasive, more distant, and his excuses for not meeting in person became increasingly flimsy. I felt he might be in a tight situation and want to act the man, so I sent him back the money he returned, telling him that I loved him. I wanted the relationship to work. I had invested so much of myself in the relationship, in the idea of Ryan, that I didn't know how to let go. He simply thanked me, but nothing much changed in his new behavior, and the nagging doubts in me refused to be silenced. They grew stronger, gnawing at me, and I knew I couldn't keep pretending that everything was fine. I had to find out the truth, no matter how much it might hurt. Ryan frequently canceled our plans to meet in person at the last minute, always citing work emergencies or family obligations. I didn't want to think much of it. After all, life is unpredictable. But as the cancellations became more frequent, I couldn't ignore the growing pang of disappointment. The biggest red flag came one evening when I received a message from Ryan that was clearly intended for someone else. The message was short and flirtatious, filled with inside jokes that I didn't recognize. When I confronted Ryan about it, he was quick to apologize, claiming it was a stupid mistake and that he was just chatting with an old friend. His tone sounded sincere, but I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was seriously wrong. Despite my growing doubts, I was reluctant to let go. I had invested so much emotionally in Ryan that the thought of starting over was too painful. The connection we shared kept me awake at night, imagining a future together. The idea of leaving it all behind was almost unbearable. I decided to confront Ryan directly. I messaged him, insisting we meet in person. To my surprise, this time Ryan agreed. But rather than invite me to his home or office, he asked me to visit a construction site he claimed to be overseeing in a remote village. After some consideration, I decided to go, hoping that meeting Ryan in person would provide clarity and resolve my doubts. The journey to the village took me through winding roads and rural landscapes. As I arrived, I was struck by the starkness of the area. The village was remote, with minimal development and few signs of activity. Ryan explained that it was because of the abundance of natural resources the company needed. Ryan greeted me warmly, dressed in a fitting t-shirt, blue jeans, and black canvas shoes. On the surface, he matched the pictures he had been sending me, at least. But there was something different about him in person, something that set me on edge. His smile was charming, but it didn't reach his eyes. There was a coldness there that I hadn't noticed before. "Emma, it's so good to finally see you," Ryan said, his voice smooth as ever. He thanked me for the money I sent to him, saying that it really was helpful. I was happy. He showed me an expanse of vast, untouched vegetation and explained that the construction had yet to start. As an architect, it was his job to plan the site location. He arranged for me to stay in a nearby lodge to wait for him to finish a meeting. Despite my unease, I decided to stay the night in the remote village. I had a few days off work, and the change of scenery might do me good. More importantly, I hoped this visit would finally allow me to confront Ryan about the mounting concerns that had been gnawing at me. That evening, as I lay on the bed in the dimly lit room at the lodge, my heart pounded with a mix of anxiety and anticipation. I had been careful, avoiding suspicious people and staying alert. But when a knock came at my door, I couldn't help but feel a sense of foreboding. The voice on the other side claimed to be from Ryan, with an urgent message for me. I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened the door, only to be met by two men who quickly forced their way in. Before I could scream, they clamped a hand over my mouth, muffling my cries. They blindfolded me, tied my hands, and dragged me out of the room. My world spun as they transported me through the back door of the lodge to an unknown location. When they finally removed the blindfold, I found myself in a cold, unfinished building. The walls were bare, with exposed concrete and steel rods sticking out from the ceiling. I was thrown onto the dusty floor, my wrists still bound, and left in the darkness. Hours turned into days. I could barely sleep or eat the food they gave me. My mind raced with thoughts of what could be next. My captors had taken my phone and were using it to call my contacts, demanding ransom. I could hear them in the next room, negotiating with the people they called. One day, they brought the phone to me. It was my boss in the office. I cried and apologized for my mistake, but he said I shouldn't worry. My safety was more important. I could hear my abductors laughing as they plotted their next move. It became clear that Ryan was behind it all. He had done it to many innocent ladies looking for love online. But fate had other plans. On the fourth night, the men assigned to watch over me began to doze off. Their snores grew louder, giving me the chance I desperately needed. I wriggled my wrists until the rope loosened enough for me to slip my hands free. Holding my breath, I slowly crept past the sleeping guards, careful not to make a sound. Once I reached the door, I bolted. With one last glance over my shoulder, I took off running, my footsteps pounding against the dirt road as I sprinted away. The once peaceful village now felt like a labyrinth of danger, with potential threats lurking around every corner. Every sound seemed amplified, the rustling of leaves, the crunch of gravel beneath my shoes, the pounding of my heart in my ears. I ran through the night even though I didn't know where I was going, my heart pounding in my chest, until I reached a nearby village. The locals were shocked to see me but quickly offered their help. They took me to the police station. Soon, the sound of sirens pierced the evening air. The police arrived in force, surrounded the lodge and the village, ensuring that no one could escape. The police acted swiftly, launching an urgent search for Ryan and his accomplices while I went into the lodge for my belongings. But Ryan and his accomplices were not caught. I left the village the next day. Later, the authorities began piecing together the details of Ryan's operations. Ryan had used various aliases and fake identities to carry out his crimes, making it difficult to track him down. Despite the challenges, the authorities were determined to bring him to justice. My escape not only saved my life but also exposed a larger criminal network that had been operating in the region. My experience became a key piece of evidence in the authorities' efforts to dismantle the operation, and my cooperation was instrumental in their pursuit of justice. One day, I decided to do some more digging about Ryan. I started by searching Ryan's name online, hoping to find some evidence of his architectural work. I found nothing, no social media profiles, no portfolio, not even a mention in any architectural circle. Growing more uneasy, I turned to a reverse image search on the photos Ryan had sent me. My heart sank when the results came back. The photos were stock images, available on multiple websites. None of them were Ryan's own. On a second thought, I searched for online love scams on Facebook, and there was Ryan's picture. Women had posted a barrage of negative comments about him. Social media platforms revealed more stories of Ryan's deception. My days became a whirlwind of emotions, relief mingled with an overwhelming sense of betrayal. I had come so close to becoming another statistic, another victim lured by a charming smile and empty promises. It was a harsh awakening, one that shattered my trust in the digital world and left me questioning my judgment. In the weeks that followed, I worked closely with the police to provide as much information as possible. The case garnered significant attention, and as more victims came forward, the true extent of Ryan's network began to unravel. He had used many names, from Ben, Josh, Kyle, Michael, Brian, to Ryan, a new name for every new trap. Despite the trauma I had endured, I found solace in knowing that my actions had helped prevent others from falling into the same trap. The experience had left scars, but it also ignited a fire within me, a determination to use my story to raise awareness about the dangers of online deception. With the support of the authorities, I became an advocate for fraud awareness, sharing my story with others in the hope that it might protect them from similar schemes. I spoke at events, wrote articles, and participated in online campaigns, determined to make a difference. Though Ryan and his accomplices had been arrested, I knew there are others like him out there. In the meantime, I had to rebuild my life, piece by piece, and learn to trust again. The experience had changed me, but it hadn't broken me. I was stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to live a life free from the shadows of fear and deception. Looking back, I realized that the signs had been there all along. I had just been too eager for love, too willing to overlook the red flags in the hope that I had finally found the one. It was a hard lesson to learn, but it made me stronger, more cautious, and more determined to protect myself in the future. But it wasn't just about protecting myself from others, it was about forgiving myself for the mistakes I had made, for allowing myself to be deceived. I had to learn to let go of the anger and resentment, to move on from the experience without letting it define me. It took time, but eventually, I have found peace. I now focus on the things that truly matter to me, my career and happiness. In doing so, I have discovered a new sense of self-worth, one that wasn't tied to the approval or affection of someone else. Also, I have come to understand that forgiveness wasn't just about letting go of the hurt someone else had caused me, it was about freeing myself from the grip of the pain. About choosing to move forward with my life, wiser and stronger than before. I haven't given up on love or relationships, but I know now that the right ones are not things I can force or rush. It will come when the time is right, and when it does, I'll be ready, not because I'm looking for someone to complete me, but because I'm already whole. Please share this story to help others not to fall into the online trap. Thanks for listening. Emma.